as the president was having his mind read by the evening's entertainment. Several thuds could be heard in the ballroom. Initially, neither the president nor the guests took much notice. Then, a column of security, Secret Service, and tactical teams swarmed the ballroom. The vice president and president were quickly whisked off stage, followed by the president of the White House press corps, Wei Zhang. Secret Service jumped tables and flipped chairs to rush cabinet members, including Stephen Miller and a pregnant Katie Miller, out a side door. The Speaker of the House was rushed through the lobby. Cabinet secretaries were extracted from their tables, while ambassadors, VIPs, and guests sheltered under them. Journalists ducked for cover while trying to record on their phones. Guests who weren't evacuated were asked to wait. But with an active crime scene just outside the ballroom door, the president instead called a press conference at the White House.
Can you describe what was going through your mind, how you were feeling in that moment?
That's a very good question, actually. It's always shocking when something like this happens. It's happened to me a little bit, and that never changes. The fact, we were sitting right next to each other, the First Lady on my right, and I heard a noise and sort of thought it was a tray. I thought it was a tray going down. You know, I've heard that many times, and it was a pretty loud noise. And it was from quite far away. He hadn't breached the area at all. They really got him. But so it was quite far away, but it was a gun. And some people really understood that pretty quickly. Other people didn't. I was watching to see what was happening. Probably should have gone down even faster.
Back at the Hilton, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Mayor of D.C., and Chief of Police held a press conference.
I'm not exactly 100% familiar with this building. I do know in this incident tonight, I know there was a security plan that was developed by the Secret Service that the Metropolitan Police Department assisted with, and I know that security plan did work this evening.
Leaving many unanswered questions, an empty ballroom, and visibly shaken staff left to clean up the mess. Joining us now are Bloomberg's Eric Martin, who covers the State Department, and Jeff Mason, Bloomberg's White House correspondent. Jeff, you are also a former head of the White House Correspondents Association. You have planned this dinner, and when we were talking while the piece was rolling, you were very adeptly correcting me. I thought capacity was like 1,200 in the room, but you were telling me it's much more than that.
It's more than twice that. It's about 2,600, and as you said, it's a room full of journalists, of course, members of the White House Correspondents Association, their sources, government officials, and last night was especially newsy before all of this happened because President Trump was coming for the first time and hadn't come during any of the years that he was president during his first term, and this is the first time he's come during his second term. He's been, of course, before as a guest, I believe in 2011 when President Obama was in office.
Jeff, talk about the effort that goes into planning this event. You mentioned you were the president of that association.
Yeah.
My understanding is that's like a second full-time job to have to do all this. This is the marquee event that you have to be working toward. And I think a question that a lot of folks have is, what is it like to have this event at that hotel, to secure it? Was anything different about the way that the hotel was secured last night compared to what you've seen in years past and certainly when you were running the association?
Well, I can tell you, number one, in terms of the planning, it takes months, and the ballroom itself, the space, is booked more than a year in advance. So it was interesting to me that the president said last night he wanted it to be rescheduled within 30 days. I mean, just from a purely logistical level, I don't know how easy that would be, given that that type of thing requires way advanced booking. And to your question about security, David, I didn't notice anything different last night, other than to get into the hotel, I had to show, and I bet you guys had to show, just a ticket outside on the street. Which was, that was a little bit...
I've had that happen in years past, though.
Okay.
It's like any security situation, it's only as strong as the person at the checkpoint, so it can vary depending on how strict they're being. But I have had in various years, sometimes they make you show a ticket on the street, and sometimes not so much.
That's right. But the key point in terms of security is there's not a magnetometer available or necessary until the ballroom floor. So the floors above that, not just including the guest room floors, but the couple floors below or right above that, where there are receptions that people can go to and do go to, are unsecure. And that, I think, is going to be a question for law enforcement authorities as to how secure this whole space was and is up till that point where you go through the magnetometers to go into the ballroom.
Eric, I want to ask you, because you were there with us all evening, we played that clip of the president, and Jeff and I were talking about this as well. it doesn't look like he either doesn't register the noise or just, it was a very, I mean, David, you were there. It was a very loud room. I don't know what you guys heard, but in hindsight, I figured out what it was. But in the moment, it wasn't clear what it was. And I'm wondering what the people around you thought it was, or if you, like most of my table, didn't know this was happening until we saw a phalanx of security streaming down that one open center aisle, and then the guns came out and everybody got down.
So our table was in the outer ring of the ballroom, closest to where these shots rang out.
Okay.
And so we were just sitting there, actually with my back to the stage, the way the seating arrangement was, a circular table, and pouring a glass of wine, having a salad, and then suddenly out of nowhere I heard this pop, 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 like 4 successive, very quick sounds. And there was kind of a...
Did you stop? Like, was it loud enough where you were that people, like, stopped?
Absolutely. Everyone was, I think everyone around me was wondering what that sound was. And then there was kind of a group reaction. I mean, it's almost like a wave at the baseball park when you see everybody else, in that case, rising. In this case, everybody else was diving. People were getting under tables. We heard someone shout, "Get down." And so everyone just threw themselves on the ground. And of course, in this context and understanding, you have the president, the vice president, basically the entire cabinet at this event. In that context, certainly the first few seconds it occurred to me, at least, that this could be a target for an attack. I was terrified. I thought about also when the Secret Service agents burst through the door, it wasn't apparent to me, at least, whether it was an outside security response to protect us or an attack happening. And so you wonder about with the strength of automatic weapons and things, you're wondering, is somebody straying the ballroom with bullets? What is going on? Absolutely terrifying. I had my heart in my throat for a few seconds until we heard that the sound went down, and then you heard the security personnel evacuating people.
I just want to echo what Eric's saying. I was seated near him, and there is this huge well where a lot of tables were, you both included, and we were on this kind of outer perimeter circumference of the room, closer to that noise. And I think, Jeff, what was striking to me was kind of the quiet that emerged after that happened. And there was a very long period where we were kind of all awaiting instruction on what we should do in the moments that followed. And there really wasn't an announcement for 10, 15 minutes till I think on that outer rim, were told that we had to leave the place entirely. And then there was this kind of strange dichotomy. You two both remained in the room.
We had no information, and the phones were not working. At one point, they were not working. And, protocol is to jam signals and stuff like this. I don't know if this happened or not. And then this always happens in any crush of people. There's just not enough bandwidth in people. But we were getting no information. I didn't know you guys had left. And we were all just kind of looking around. The other question, Jeff, is there were so many cabinet members there. Who was a designated survivor? Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that. But I do think, to your point, David, and to what both of you are saying, the information sort of depended a little bit based on where you were, or the signals and the instructions depended a little bit on where you were. Where I was, there were no instructions. I could also hear those popping sounds, and everyone at my table also went straight down underneath and stayed there for a while. But my own feeling was like, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Because when you started to hear any sounds or words from people, one of them I know that you had in your video, Christina, was of some people shouting USA, USA. My initial thought at that point was a negative one, that whoever was shouting that might be a gunman himself or herself coming through. So there just wasn't much that you could tell when you were underneath the table and listening for instructions as to whether to stay, whether to go, whether to evacuate, whether to wait. And that played out up on the stage as well. The president and the vice president were evacuated, but I know that some members of the board of the White House Correspondents Association who were seated on the dais were told not to move until the principals were secured.
With the USA, but Eric, to your point, I was next to someone who was shouting USA, USA, so I knew who it was, and I knew it was an administration official.
That's interesting. Of course, then you would have known that.
So I did turn to them and say, they need to clear the room, you need to be quiet, and they did. But I heard from you and from others, especially those who had been at January 6th, or those who had been at events like that was the scariest part, to your point, because it was very unclear if the threat was coming from outside or inside the ballroom, and because there was no instruction, and really never was security-wise for us, not a lot, that was one of the more terrifying moments, especially for people who've covered January 6th and other things like that, is where is this coming from, and are they already in the room?
And we heard the doors burst open, and when you take a moment to reflect, you realize that probably given how secure the ballroom itself was, that it would have been very hard for somebody to get through those doors. But in the moment, it was very unclear. It was just a lot of noise. Everyone was down. I saw a few colleagues, particularly photographers, who have perhaps been in this kind of hostile environment before, standing up and taking photos to document what was going on. I think for many of us, it was just a survival and self-preservation instinct. I know it was not. I had someone ask me, were people screaming, were people shouting? I said, no, it was quite organized,
actually.
and people were being very, very cautious and trying not to spread panic, but I think just trying to get down and to listen for instructions. Obviously, the fact that the shooter was able to gain access to the hotel or to this space at all is concerning, and I'm sure is something that that security, Secret Service, police, FBI will be reviewing. In a certain way, as President Trump said, the Secret Service they performed valiantly. They kept everyone in the ballroom safe. No one in the ballroom was injured or killed, and so that part of the security plan to secure the ballroom worked, but obviously extremely concerning that someone could get as close as this individual apparently did to all of the activity, to the cabinet, to thousands of people. This could have turned out far worse than it did.
Jeff, pick up on something that Eric said. I was in the lobby waiting after we've been taken out of the ballroom. I noticed there are just regular guests at the hotel there as well. Clarify that for us as well. It's not like the White House Correspondents Association buys out the hotel for the night. It is very much a hotel where other visitors to Washington are staying. So to Eric's point, a huge challenge here must be having that level of separation between regular guests at the hotel and those who are attending.
There was actually a woman with her hair in a towel and slippers as several of the people were coming in the door. Yeah, because she's looking for a key.
I have no doubt. It's a hotel in central D.C. for our listeners who are listening from outside of this town. It's a storied hotel in that it is also the hotel where President Reagan was shot.
Back in 81.
Back in 81. Sometimes it's referred to as the Hinckley Hilton because of the assailant at that time. But that's also an important point because the security measures for a president, any president, at that hotel are particularly high. The year that I was the president of the White House Correspondents Association, President Trump didn't come, but we were in the area backstage and in a waiting room. I got to see where there's a special entrance that was created for presidents to come through that is secure. And that entrance was created after the Reagan shooting. So there's a special area. That's one reason why the association continues to have its dinner there every year. It's number one, because of the security protocols, and number two, because of that large space.
There's also, that is the reason we have the White House pool system, is because of that shooting. Because when Reagan was shot, there were not all the cameras there. It used to not be, we all travel with the president, we take turns. That used to not exist. When Reagan was shot, not everyone was there. So after that, all the networks wanted to follow the president all the time, and it became overwhelming. Jeff, check me if I'm wrong. It became overwhelming for the president to kind of manage, and so they worked out this deal, this pool rotation system. But that, my understanding, is the precipitating incident.
I think it goes back a little earlier than that, but certainly that was an example of a time when the pool was there. I mean, one piece of the pool responsibility is just to be there in case something like this, God forbid, ever happens again.
Jeff, very quickly here, there was a lot of resonance to what's happened in years past. Butler came up during that briefing that the president gave yesterday. Talk a bit about that. It's something that perhaps we all thought of in that moment, that this is a president who has lived through something like this before.
Sure. I would say a couple of things. Number one, we don't know the motive of the shooter yet. I mean, it's possible that he was there wanting to shoot the President of the United States. It's also possible that he knew it was a room full of journalists and wanted to take on that crowd. We just don't know. But it's absolutely spot on to say that this president has faced a couple assassination attempts since the campaign, and that one being, of course, the biggest one in Butler, where two other people were shot and killed, and he was injured on one of his ears. Then there was someone who was apprehended at his Mar-a-Lago estate at his golf course, rather, in Florida. And he was asked about that last night, and he used that question to say that he felt that he was targeted because of the impact of his presidency and the things that he was doing. He also talked about the need for a White House ballroom. So he brought politics into that very extraordinary press conference last night that he held after this shooting.